Welcome to the new month of August 2025. Right, so what's in store for us? Today, I'll talk about a house divided at the Federal Reserve. Right, this is something that you don't hear. July's 2025 dual dissent and the road ahead. Now, the Federal Reserve late July 2025 policy meeting produced an outcome rarely seen in modern times, where two of its members of the Fed's Board of Governors dissented from the decision. Now, the Fed held its benchmark rate steady at 4.25% to 4.5%, but Governors Michelle Bowman and Christopher Waller voted against the majority, preferring an immediate 0.25% rate cut. Now, this dual dissent by board governors is the first of its kind in over 3 decades. Any dissent from Fed governors as opposed to regional Fed bank presidents is unusual, since the Fed board members typically strive for consensus. Now, both dissenters are known as generally hawkish officials, yet here they argue for rate cuts due to concerns that the Fed may be over-tightening amid shifting economic winds. Now, Powell downplayed the split, characterizing it as part of a healthy discussion. He said this was quite a good meeting all around the table, noting that even dissenters provided clear reasoning for their views. Now, so why the two Fed governors broke ranks? Now, to understand the significance of this rare dissent, it's important to examine what Waller and Bowman have been saying. Governor Waller has grown increasingly worried that the economy's momentum is slowing and the labor market could be stalling. Waller sees danger in the Fed not easing, and if the job markets cool further or a recession looms, cutting rates sooner could cushion the blow, right? Governor Bowman, for her part, brushed off fears that the inflationary impact of new tariffs would be too severe, suggesting she wasn't overly worried that a small rate cut would unleash higher inflation. Both Waller and Bowman were appointed to the Fed board by President Donald Trump, and their push for rate cut happens to align with intense political pressure from the White House. It's possible the two dissenters feel emboldened by this political backdrop. Now, the dissents also hint at debates over the Fed's priorities. In essence, Waller and Bowman appear more concerned about faltering growth and employment, whereas the majority remains focused on ensuring inflation is truly defeated. This kind of split growth versus inflation emphasis is an age-old tension in central banking. Now, the tariff, stroking inflation, and the Fed debate. Now, complicating the Fed's job in 2025 is an external force largely outside its control, trade tariffs. Fed Chair Powell addressed this head-on in his press conference. He acknowledged that the high tariffs has begun to show, though more clearly in prices of some goods, contributing to recent inflation increases. Now, consumer price index data and the Fed's preferred inflation gauge had ticked up in the past 2 months, with overall inflation now roughly 0.5 percentage points above the 2.2% target. The Fed is grappling with whether tariffs will cause a brief one-off jump in prices, which might fade on its own, or a more lasting inflation problem. If it's the former, the Fed could look through the inflation blip and feel freer to cut rates. If it's the latter, they'll need to keep policy tight longer. Now, research by the Fed-owned economists, right, indicates that the tariff rounds in early 2025 have indeed lifted consumer prices noticeably. A Fed analysis detected that the import tariffs implemented in February and March 2025 have already passed through partially to consumer good prices, contributing about 0.1 percentage points to core PCE inflation as of March, right? So, and this is likely just the beginning, and that's the key point. If tariff remains in place, their full effect could be larger in coming months. In fact, Fed staff simulations suggest the complete set of 2025 tariff, including those of Chinese goods and others, might add roughly 0.5 percentage points to core inflation over time. As such, how the Fed navigates this will hinge on incoming data in the next few months. And this also shows that Powell refused to cave under political pressure. Powell repeatedly emphasized that the Fed's decisions are focused on the data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risk, and not on political factors. This was a subtle but clear rebuke to political pressures being exerted by President Trump. He also said lowering rates to make government debts payment cheaper is not the Fed's job, and doing so would undermine the Fed's credibility on controlling inflation. So now the key point is this. With September and beyond, what's going to happen to that? Will the Fed cut rates twice in 2025? As that's the one that's going to decide, what will happen next. Now, all eyes now turn to the Fed's September 16 to 17 meeting, and this will be a crucial meeting to know the general momentum. As of now, Powell's commentary has dampened hopes of a September cut. Traders in futures markets are betting the odds of a cut in September are essentially a coin flip or lower. It's either 50% or lower than 50%, whereas a cut by the end of the year is still anticipated. Now, this cautious stance is somewhat at odds with the Fed's own prior forecast. In June, the Fed summary of economic projections, i.e. the dot plot, penciled in 2 quarter points rate cuts in 2025. Those projected cuts were predicted on inflation continuing cool and economic growth slowing, allowing the Fed to gently nudge rates closer to a neutral level. Now, the question is whether Fed will maintain the forecast or revised it. If by September meeting, inflation is still running around 2.9% as it is now, and showing only fitful progress, the Fed might signal fewer cuts than originally thought. It's quite possible the dots in the next projection could show only one cut in 2025. So by September's meeting, we'll have fresh inflation numbers, including 2 more PCE reports and jobs reports. Those will likely decide the outcome. Okay, so going forward, we have to watch this very, very closely. So prior to these inflation reports, I believe, that the more or less we would know what's going to happen next, and if inflation proves to to be the what you call stubborn, then you're probably going to see the dollar still maintaining its strength as what we are seeing right now due to this oversold status. Okay, so with tariffs hopefully on the back burner, everything is done already. We're not looking at that anymore because things are clear, and what's left is the inflation data to study. Okay, so we'll see from there, and that's my report for the. Thank you.